I am 26 years old and my husband, Leo, is 29. The day we got married was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I had dreamed about it since I was a little girl. I imagined the white dress, the beautiful flowers, and the man I loved waiting for me at the end of the aisle. I imagined my family and friends smiling, sharing in our joy. What I never imagined was my mother-in-law, Eleanor, turning our sacred ceremony into a stage for her own drama. I should have seen it coming. The months leading up to the wedding were filled with small battles. Eleanor had an opinion on everything. My dress was not traditional enough. The flowers I chose were too plain. The venue was not as grand as the one her friend's daughter had. She would make these comments with a tight, polite smile, making it impossible to argue without looking like I was being overly sensitive. Leo would always defend her. "That's just how she is, Clara," he would say, wrapping an arm around me. "She just wants everything to be perfect for her only son." I tried to believe him. I really did. I told myself that she was just nervous about letting go. I wanted to have a good relationship with her for Leo's sake. So I bit my tongue. I smiled and nodded. I let her change the flower arrangements. I let her add her friends to the guest list, even though it pushed us over our budget. I compromised on everything, telling myself that peace was more important than peonies. I thought if I could just get through the wedding day, everything would settle down. We would be married and a new boundary would naturally form. I was wrong. The ceremony was beautiful. The sun was shining and the church was filled with the people we loved most. I walked down the aisle, my eyes locked on Leo. He looked so handsome, and his smile washed away all the stress of the past few months. For a moment, everything was perfect. We stood before the priest, Father Michael, ready to say our vows. He began to speak about the sanctity of marriage, about two families becoming one. And then, a sound cut through the quiet reverence of the church. It was a loud, theatrical sob. Every head turned. There, in the front pew, was Eleanor, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Her face was a mask of exaggerated grief. Leo's hand tightened in mine. I could feel the tension radiating from him. I kept my eyes fixed on the priest, praying that she would stop. But she did not stop. Her sobs grew louder, more disruptive. Then came the words, spoken loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm losing my only son," she wailed, her voice cracking with fake sorrow. A wave of hot embarrassment washed over me. I could feel hundreds of eyes on us. My special moment, our special moment, was being hijacked. She was making our wedding about her loss, not our love. The air grew thick with awkward silence. My own mother shot me a look of pure fury from across the aisle. Leo looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. He gave his mother a pleading look, but she just shook her head, burying her face in her hands. I stood there frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. This was the line she had just crossed. It was no longer about flowers or guest lists. This was a public declaration that she did not approve, that I was an intruder taking her son away. The silence stretched on, feeling like an eternity. I did not know what to do. I did not know what to say. I just wanted it to be over. And then, Father Michael cleared his throat. He paused the ceremony, his calm gaze settling on Eleanor in the front row. He was an older man with kind eyes, but right then, they held a firm, steady light. He did not look angry, just resolute. The entire church held its breath, waiting to see what he would do. "Eleanor," he said, his voice gentle but carrying a surprising weight that filled the entire space. Everyone leaned in, listening intently. He did not raise his voice, yet it commanded absolute attention. "A son is not something to be lost," he continued, his words slow and deliberate. "He is a man to be celebrated as he builds his own family, a new branch on the tree you so carefully nurtured." He paused again, letting the words sink in. I saw Eleanor flinch, her shoulders tightening. She had expected sympathy, perhaps even for the ceremony to pause for her sake. She had not expected this. A bond of love is not a chain of ownership, Father Michael said, his eyes still fixed on her. We spoke about this. That last sentence landed like a stone in a silent pond. We spoke about this. What did that mean? What had they spoken about? A murmur rippled through the guests. My mind raced. This was not a spontaneous outburst of grief. It was something she had discussed with the priest beforehand, which meant he had warned her, and she had done it anyway. I glanced at Leo. The color had drained from his face. He looked utterly bewildered, his eyes darting from his mother to the priest and back again. The perfect, happy facade of our wedding day had cracked, and underneath something ugly was beginning to show. Eleanor quickly composed herself, her sobs ceasing as if a switch had been flipped. She sat up straight, avoiding everyone's gaze, her face set in a mask of wounded pride. The priest, satisfied that he had made his point, turned his attention back to us. He gave us a small, reassuring smile and seamlessly continued with the ceremony. But something had shifted. The magic was gone, replaced by a cold, unsettling feeling in the pit of my stomach. As we exchanged our vows, the words felt hollow. I could feel Eleanor's resentment burning into my back. I was no longer just a bride getting married. I was a woman who had just been publicly challenged, and a priest had just hinted that there was a much deeper, darker story that I knew nothing about. The reception was a nightmare of forced smiles and whispered conversations. Every time I looked up, I saw a small group of guests glancing our way before quickly looking away. The story of Eleanor's outburst and the priest's strange response had clearly become the main event. Eleanor, for her part, acted as if nothing had happened. She floated around the room, laughing with her friends, accepting compliments on how beautiful the wedding was, as if she had orchestrated the entire thing flawlessly. But whenever her eyes met mine, they were cold as ice. She was daring me to say something, to make a scene. I knew that was what she wanted. She wanted me to be the hysterical, overreacting bride. I refused to give her the satisfaction. I danced with my new husband. I smiled for pictures. I toasted with our guests. I played the part of the happy bride, but inside, I was churning with anger and confusion. Leo was trying his best to pretend everything was fine. He held my hand. He kissed my cheek. He told me how beautiful I looked. But he was distracted, his gaze constantly drifting towards his mother. He was walking on eggshells, desperately trying to keep the peace between the two most important women in his life. I felt a surge of resentment. Why was it always my job to keep the peace? Why did he never expect his mother to? "Are you okay?" he whispered to me during a slow dance. "I am fine," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "Your mother put on quite a show." He sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I know. I am so sorry, Clara. I will talk to her." That was not okay. I wanted to believe him, but he had promised to talk to her before about so many other things. Nothing ever changed. I knew this time would be no different. The thought exhausted me. My wedding day was not even over, and I was already tired of the fight that lay ahead. We spent the night in a hotel before our honeymoon. As we were unpacking our overnight bags, surrounded by cards and small gifts from our guests, I tried to push the events of the day out of my mind. I wanted to focus on us, on the start of our new life together. But the unease lingered. Leo was quiet, and I knew he was thinking about his mother. The next morning, we were supposed to leave for our honeymoon. We were packing our suitcases when Leo's phone rang. It was Eleanor. I could hear her high, chirpy voice through the phone. Leo's face was tense. "Yes, Mom." "No, we are about to leave." Okay, I will tell her." He hung up and looked at me, an apologetic expression on his face. "Mom says she left our main wedding gift in our apartment. She wants to drop it off before we go to the airport. She says it is too big to leave outside." I felt a familiar sense of dread. "Leo, can it not wait until we get back? We are going to be late." "She says it is important," he said, avoiding my eyes. "She sounds really upset. Maybe this is her way of apologizing. I knew it was not an apology. It was another power play, another way to insert herself into our lives, even on the first day of our marriage. But I was too tired to fight. Fine, I said, my voice flat. Tell her to be quick. An hour later, Eleanor arrived at our apartment, all smiles and apologies. She was carrying a large, awkwardly wrapped box. I am so sorry to bother you two lovebirds, she cooed, placing the box on our coffee table. I just could not bear the thought of this sitting in my car. It is far too special. She fussed around the box, straightening the ribbon. And Clara, dear, she said, turning to me, her eyes gleaming with false sincerity. I hope you can forgive my little emotional display yesterday. It is just so hard to let my baby boy go. The words were sweet, but her tone was mocking. I knew she was not sorry at all. It is fine, Eleanor, I said, forcing a smile. We should really get going, though. Our flight is in 3 hours. Of course, she said, waving a dismissive hand. You two run along. I will just let myself out. She gave Leo a long, lingering hug, whispering something in his ear that made him blush. Then, she was gone. The apartment felt strangely silent after she left. I looked at the large box on the table. What do you think it is? I asked Leo. I have no idea, he said, shaking his head. With my mom, it could be anything. We decided to open it quickly before we left. It was probably some extravagant piece of home decor that I would hate but be forced to display. Leo tore off the paper. Inside was a brand new, top-of-the-line espresso machine. It was incredibly expensive, the kind of thing we had talked about saving up for one day. Wow, Leo said, his eyes wide. I can't believe she got us this. I should have been thrilled. It was a generous gift, but something felt off. Eleanor was not a generous person. Her gifts always came with strings attached. Tucked inside the box was a card. I picked it up and opened it. The front had a generic store-bought message about love and marriage, but inside, in Eleanor's spiky, aggressive handwriting, was a personal note. Dearest Leo and Clara, it began, I hope you enjoy this small token of my love. I had to pull a few strings to get it for you on such short notice. A little wedding emergency came up, and I had to dip into the house fund you both so graciously let me manage. But I know you will agree it was worth it to start your marriage off on the right foot. All my love, Mom. I read the note twice, the words blurring in front of my eyes. The house fund. She was talking about the joint savings account Leo and I had started. It was for the down payment on our future home. We had put every spare penny into that account for the last 2 years. My hands started to shake. What is it? Leo asked. Seeing the look on my face, I could not speak. I just handed him the card. He read it, his brow furrowing in confusion. What does she mean, the house fund? He asked slowly. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling as I opened our banking app. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I navigated to our joint savings account. I stared at the screen, my blood turning to ice. The balance was almost zero. There was a single massive withdrawal from 3 days ago. A withdrawal for $5,000. The exact price of the espresso machine she had just given us. She had not just bought us a gift. She had stolen our savings, our future, and then wrapped it up in a box and presented it to us with a smile, as if she had done us a favor. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a mother being overprotective. This was a calculated act of sabotage. And as I stood there, staring at the empty bank account, I finally understood. The scene at the wedding, the constant criticism, the financial theft, it was all part of her plan. A plan to drive a wedge between me and Leo, to prove that I was not good enough, to maintain her control over him. The priest's words echoed in my head. A bond of love is not a chain of ownership. Eleanor did not see Leo's marriage as a celebration. She saw it as a threat to her ownership of her son, and she would do anything to break that bond. "Leo, look," I said, my voice trembling as I showed him the phone screen. She took it. She took all of it. He stared at the balance, his face paling. He scrolled through the transaction history, his thumb swiping frantically. He saw the $5,000 withdrawal. He looked from the phone to the espresso machine, then back to the phone. The confident, happy groom from yesterday was gone, replaced by a man who looked lost and utterly betrayed. "No," he whispered, shaking his head in disbelief. "No, there has to be a mistake. A reason. She would not just take it." His immediate reaction was denial. It was a defense mechanism I had seen him use countless times when it came to his mother. He would find any possible explanation, no matter how illogical, to avoid confronting the truth of her behavior. But this was different. This was not a cutting remark or a passive-aggressive comment. This was theft. "A mistake?" I asked, my voice rising with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Leo, she wrote it in the card. She said she used the money for a wedding emergency. The only emergency was her desire to buy us a gift with our own money and call it her own." I felt a cold fury building inside me. All the compromises I had made, all the times I had bitten my tongue, it all felt so foolish now. I had been trying to build a bridge to a woman who was busy planting explosives at its foundation. Leo ran a hand through his hair, pacing the small living room. "I need to call her," he said, his voice strained. "I need to hear her side of the story." My heart sank. Her side of the story. Even with undeniable proof in his hands, a signed confession in her own handwriting, he still needed to hear her excuses. It was a stark reminder of how deep his conditioning went. He was programmed to believe in the idea of his mother, the loving, doting woman she pretended to be, not the manipulative person she actually was. "What other side could there possibly be?" I demanded. "She stole from us, Leo. From our future." "Just let me talk to her, Clara," he pleaded, his eyes begging me for patience I no longer had. "Please, before we jump to conclusions." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that the conclusion had already jumped, landed, and was now staring us in the face in the form of an overpriced coffee machine. But I saw the desperation in his eyes. He needed to go through this process. He needed to hear the lie from her own lips. It was the only way he would ever be able to accept it. So I nodded, a single, sharp nod. I felt a deep, chilling sense of being utterly alone. My husband, the man who was supposed to be my partner, was still, in some fundamental way, his mother's son first. I sat on the couch, my arms wrapped around myself, and listened as he dialed her number. The phone rang once, twice, before she picked up. "Leo, darling." Eleanor's voice was sickeningly cheerful. "Are you on your way to the airport? I hope you liked your surprise." Leo took a deep breath. "Mom," he began, his voice wavering slightly. "We need to talk about the gift, about the money." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Eleanor spoke again, the cheerful tone was gone, replaced by a defensive edge. "What about it? I thought it was the perfect way to start your new home together." "You took money from our savings account," Leo said, his voice gaining a bit of strength. "You took $5,000. "I did not take it, Leo," she scoffed, her voice dripping with indignation. "I borrowed it. It was for a wedding emergency. The final payment for the florist was more than we expected. I had to cover it. I was going to pay you back." I saw Leo's shoulders relax slightly. A plausible excuse. A lifeline for him to grab onto. He wanted so badly to believe her. It would be so much easier than facing the truth. But I knew she was lying. My parents had handled the final payment for the florist. They had shown me the receipt. We had specifically divided the costs, and that was one of theirs. I stood up and walked over to Leo. I shook my head, my eyes boring into his. I mouthed the word, "No." He saw the look on my face and hesitated. He was caught between his mother's lie and his wife's certainty. Mom, he said slowly, Clara's parents paid the florist. I was there when they did it. The line went silent for a long moment. I could almost hear the gears turning in Eleanor's head as she formulated a new lie. Oh, that, she said, her voice suddenly vague. Well, there was another expense. The caterer, a last-minute charge for his extra staff. It was all so chaotic, darling. I was just trying to make sure your day was perfect. You know I would never do anything to hurt you. It was a masterful performance. She was the flustered, well-meaning mother, overwhelmed by the stress of wedding planning, making a simple mistake out of love. She was painting me as the ungrateful daughter-in-law, questioning her generosity, creating drama over nothing. I could see Leo starting to waver again. He was so used to her narratives, so accustomed to accepting them without question. I knew I had to intervene. I reached for the phone, but he pulled it away. Let me handle this. Clara, he whispered. Then he spoke into the phone again, his voice firm. Mom, that is not good enough. You should have asked us. That was our money. We need it back. Of course you will get it back, she snapped, her victim act crumbling into irritation. Honestly, the way you two are carrying on, you would think I was a common criminal. I give you a beautiful, expensive gift, and this is the thanks I get? I am your mother, Leo. I have sacrificed everything for you. A little trust would be nice. She was turning it around, making them the victims, making him feel guilty for questioning her. It was classic manipulation, and it was working. I saw the guilt flash across Leo's face. He was starting to buckle. This was the moment. The first real test of our marriage. Would he stand with me, his wife, or would he retreat back into the familiar comfort of his mother's control? I had to do something. I could not let her win this. Not this time. I walked into our bedroom and shut the door. I needed a moment to think. A moment away from the sound of Leo's strained voice trying to reason with a woman who defied reason. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my honeymoon suitcase lying open and forgotten. Our flight was in 2 hours. The thought of spending 2 weeks on a beach pretending everything was okay was unbearable. This was not something we could just put on hold and deal with later. This was a crack in the very foundation of our marriage. I pulled out my laptop and opened it. My hands were shaking, but my mind was surprisingly clear. I knew what I had to do. I needed proof. Hard, undeniable proof that Leo could not explain away. I logged into my email account and searched for the wedding planning folder. I had saved every contract, every invoice, every receipt. It was a habit my very organized father had instilled in me. I found the folder for the caterer. I opened the final invoice. It was marked, paid in full, dated 1 month before the wedding. The payment had been made from my parents' bank account. I took a screenshot. Next, I found the florist's invoice, also marked paid in full, paid by my parents. I took another screenshot. I attached both images to an email and sent them to Leo. The subject line was simple, proof. Then I did something else. I remembered my friend Sarah, who had been one of my bridesmaids. During the reception, she had pulled me aside. You will not believe what I just overheard Eleanor saying, she had whispered, her eyes wide. At the time, I was too overwhelmed to really listen. But now, her words came back to me. She was on the phone with someone, complaining about the cost of the wedding. She said, I had to get them a decent gift, of course, for appearances. I just used their little house fund. They will never even notice. I had dismissed it as gossip, as Eleanor just being her usual dramatic self. But now it was a crucial piece of the puzzle. I called Sarah. She picked up on the first ring. Clara, are you at the airport? How are you feeling? I am not at the airport, I said, my voice low and urgent. Sarah, I need you to tell me exactly what you heard Eleanor say at the reception. Word for word. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then she recounted the conversation. It was exactly as I remembered. Eleanor had not just stolen the money. She had bragged about it. She had been so confident in her ability to manipulate Leo, so certain that I would have no power to stop her, that she had gotten careless. Why? Sarah asked, her voice filled with concern. What is going on? I quickly explained the situation with the espresso machine, the card, and the empty bank account. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. That woman is evil, Sarah said, her voice filled with venom. Clara, what are you going to do? I am going to fight back, I said, a new sense of resolve hardening within me. But I need your help. Would you be willing to tell Leo what you heard? In a heartbeat, Sarah said without hesitation. You just tell me when and where. I hung up the phone, feeling a little stronger. I was not alone in this. I had evidence and I had a witness. I walked back into the living room. Leo was off the phone. He was sitting on the couch, his head in his hands. The espresso machine sat on the coffee table like a monument to his mother's deception. She is going to pay it back, he said, his voice muffled. She said she will transfer the money next week. And you believe her? I asked quietly. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and despair. I want to, Clara. I really want to. I sat down next to him and showed him my laptop. I opened the email with the screenshots of the paid invoices. He stared at them, his face grim. She lied, he whispered. She lied to me. Yes, she did, I said gently. And that is not all. I told him about my conversation with Sarah. I told him what Eleanor had been overheard saying at our wedding. As I spoke, I watched the last remnants of his denial crumble away. The hope in his eyes died, replaced by a cold, hard anger. He was finally seeing his mother not as he wished she was, but as she truly was. A liar. A thief. A manipulator. We are not going on our honeymoon, he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. We are going to fix this, right now. He stood up and walked over to the espresso machine. For a moment, I thought he was going to smash it. Instead, he carefully unplugged it, coiled the cord, and placed it back in its box. He sealed the box with packing tape, his movements precise and deliberate. What are you doing? I asked. We are returning her gift, he said, his jaw tight. And we are getting our money back. Today. He picked up his phone and called his mother back. Her number was the last one he had dialed. The call connected almost immediately. It was as if she had been waiting for him to call, expecting him to capitulate as he always did. Leo, honey, is everything all right? She asked, her voice once again filled with that sweet maternal concern that I now knew was a weapon. No, Mom, it is not, Leo said, his voice dangerously calm. Clara and I are coming over. We will be there in 20 minutes. We have something that belongs to you. He did not wait for her reply. He just hung up the phone. He turned to me, his eyes blazing with a fire I had never seen before. Are you ready? He asked. I looked at my husband, really looked at him. The man who had always tried to avoid conflict, the man who had always made excuses for his mother's bad behavior, was gone. In his place was a man who was ready to fight for his wife, for his marriage, for our future. Yes, I said, my voice steady. I am ready. The drive to Eleanor's house was silent and tense. Leo gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. I sat beside him, the box containing the espresso machine at my feet. It felt like we were carrying a bomb. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions. I was nervous about the confrontation ahead, but I also felt a strange sense of empowerment. For the first time, Leo and I were a united front against his mother. We were a team. Eleanor lived in a large, immaculate house in a wealthy suburb, the same house Leo had grown up in. It was a house that always made me feel small and inadequate. Every surface was polished, every cushion was plumped. It was a house designed for show, not for comfort. She was waiting for us at the door, her face arranged in a look of pained confusion. Leo, what is this all about? she asked, her eyes flicking nervously to the box in his hands. You sounded so upset on the phone. We need to talk, Mom, Leo said, his voice flat as he brushed past her into the house. I followed him, my heart pounding. We walked into her pristine living room. It was filled with expensive furniture and photos of Leo at various ages. There were no photos of me. Leo placed the box on her antique coffee table with a loud thud. We are returning your gift, he said simply. Eleanor stared at the box, then at Leo, her confusion morphing into indignation. Returning it? Why would you do that? It is a perfectly lovely gift. It is a lovely gift, I said, finding my voice. But we cannot accept it. Because you bought it with our money. Eleanor's head whipped around to face me. Her eyes narrowed into slits. I told Leo I borrowed the money. I had to cover unexpected wedding costs. It is a simple misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding, Eleanor, I said, my voice cold and steady. We know you are lying. I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes before she quickly masked it with outrage. How dare you speak to me like that in my own home? She hissed, turning to Leo. Leo, are you going to let her talk to me this way? This was her classic move. Divide and conquer. She was trying to position me as the aggressive, disrespectful outsider and Leo as the righteous son who needed to defend his mother's honor. In the past, it would have worked. But not today. Leo did not even look at her. His eyes were fixed on the box. She is not the one who is lying, Mom, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You told me you used the money for the florist. That was a lie. Then you said it was for the caterer. That was also a lie. We have the receipts. Everything was paid for, in full, weeks before the wedding. Eleanor was momentarily speechless. She had not expected him to have proof. She had relied on his blind trust for so long that she had grown careless. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She was scrambling for a new story, a new excuse. Well, she finally stammered. There were other things. Decorations. Tips for the staff. It was all a blur. I was just trying to help. Stop it, Leo said, his voice quiet but sharp as a razor. Just stop lying. He finally looked at her, and the pain and anger in his eyes made her physically recoil. Sarah overheard you at the reception, Mom. She heard you on the phone bragging about using our house fund to buy us a gift, bragging that we would never even notice. The color drained from Eleanor's face. She looked like a cornered animal. The witness. That was the one thing she could not explain away. Her carefully constructed facade of the loving, self-sacrificing mother was crumbling around her. That is ridiculous, she sputtered, but her voice lacked conviction. Your little friend is probably just trying to cause trouble. She is jealous. Jealous of what? I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Of your relationship with your son? The one you are actively trying to sabotage? I am not sabotaging anything, she shrieked, her composure finally breaking. I am trying to protect him. From you. You come in here with your modern ideas, thinking you know everything. You are turning him against me. No, Mom, Leo said, his voice filled with a heartbreaking sadness. You are the one who did that. You did this. With your lies. With your games. He sank onto the edge of her plush sofa, the fight suddenly draining out of him, replaced by a profound sense of grief. He was mourning the mother he thought he had. I do not understand, he said, his voice cracking. Why? Why would you do all of this? The scene at the wedding, the money. Why? Eleanor looked at her son, her only child, and for a fleeting moment I saw a flicker of genuine emotion in her eyes. It looked like fear. She was afraid of losing him, but her fear was so twisted and possessive that it had become destructive. Because you are all I have, she whispered. Tears welling in her eyes. This time they looked real. Your father is gone. You are all I have left, and she was taking you away from me. She was not taking me away, Leo said, his voice thick with emotion. We were building a life together, a life that I wanted you to be a part of. But you could not accept that. You could not stand to see me happy with someone else. The room was silent except for the sound of Eleanor's quiet sobs. But I did not feel any pity for her. Her tears were not for the pain she had caused Leo. They were for herself, for the loss of her control. "We want the money back, Eleanor," I said, my voice firm, breaking the silence. "All of it, today." She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears, her expression hardening into one of pure hatred. She saw me as the source of all her problems, the one who had exposed her, the one who had taken her son. "Fine," she spat, her voice filled with venom. "You want the money? Fine." She stood up and walked over to an antique writing desk. She pulled out a checkbook and a pen. She scribbled out a check, her movements jerky and angry. She tore it from the book and practically threw it at me. "There," she said. Take it and get out of my house." I looked at the check. It was for $5,000. I had won. We had won. But it did not feel like a victory. It felt like a tragedy. We had gotten our money back, but we had lost something far more valuable. The illusion of a happy, loving family was gone forever, and I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. We left Eleanor's house without another word. The check was clutched in my hand, a flimsy piece of paper that represented so much more than just money. It was a symbol of our freedom, a declaration of our independence. But it was also a reminder of the deep, painful wound that had been torn open in our family. The drive back to our apartment was as silent as the one on the way there, but the silence felt different. It was not the tense, anxious silence of before. It was a heavy, mournful silence. Leo stared out the window, his face a grim, unreadable mask. I did not know what to say. I had wanted this. I had wanted him to see the truth. But seeing the pain it caused him was agonizing. When we got back to our apartment, the first thing we did was cancel our honeymoon. Neither of us was in the mood to celebrate. The thought of lying on a beach, sipping cocktails, felt absurd. We called the airline and the hotel. We lost most of the money, but we did not care. The financial loss was nothing compared to the emotional toll of the last 24 hours. For the next few days, a strange quiet settled over our apartment. Leo was withdrawn, lost in his own thoughts. He would sit for hours, staring into space. He was processing a lifetime of manipulation, reevaluating every memory, every interaction with his mother. I gave him his space. I knew he needed to grieve. I busied myself with the practical things. I deposited the check. I unpacked our honeymoon suitcases. I tried to create a sense of normalcy in the midst of the chaos. But every time I looked at the empty space on our kitchen counter where the espresso machine had briefly sat, a fresh wave of anger washed over me. One evening, about a week after the confrontation, I was sitting on the couch reading a book when I felt a presence beside me. It was Leo. He sat down and took my hand. His hand was warm and steady in mine. "I am so sorry, Clara," he said, his voice quiet but clear. "I am sorry for not seeing it sooner. I am sorry for all the times I made you feel like you were crazy or overreacting. You were right. You were right about all of it." Tears welled in my eyes. It was the apology I had been waiting years to hear. It was the validation I had so desperately needed. "It is not your fault," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "She is a master manipulator. She programmed you to trust her." "That is not an excuse," he said, shaking his head. "I should have protected you. I should have stood up for you. From now on, I will. I promise. It is you and me now. We are a team." He pulled me into his arms and I held on to him, burying my face in his chest. I felt a sense of relief so profound it was almost painful. The wedge his mother had tried to drive between us had failed. In fact, it had done the opposite. It had forged us into a stronger, more united couple. We were no longer two individuals trying to navigate a difficult family dynamic. We were a single, unbreakable unit, but I knew the battle was not over. Eleanor was not the type of person to accept defeat gracefully. She would not just fade into the background. She would find a new way to attack, a new way to cause trouble. I was right. A few days later, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then answered. "Is this Clara?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, this is she," I said. "My name is Brenda. I am a friend of Eleanor's," the woman said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I am just calling to see how you are doing. Eleanor is so worried about you and Leo. She is just heartbroken about this little misunderstanding." I felt a surge of cold fury. A little misunderstanding. So this was her new strategy. She was sending her friends, her flying monkeys, to do her dirty work. She was trying to rewrite the narrative, to paint herself as the victim and me as the cruel, ungrateful daughter-in-law who had turned her son against her. "There is no misunderstanding, Brenda," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Eleanor stole $5,000 from us. When we confronted her, she lied about it. That is not a misunderstanding. That is a crime." There was a shocked silence on the other end of the line. Brenda had clearly only heard Eleanor's carefully edited version of events. "Oh," she said, her voice small. "Well, I am sure she did not mean any harm. She loves Leo so much." "Her love is conditional and controlling," I said, my voice sharp. "And I am not interested in discussing my marriage with one of her friends. Please do not call me again." I hung up the phone, my hand shaking with adrenaline. I knew this was just the beginning. Eleanor was launching a smear campaign. She was trying to poison the well, to turn her social circle against me. I told Leo about the phone call. He was furious. He immediately called his mother. I could hear his angry, muffled voice from the other room. He told her to stop. He told her to leave us alone. He told her that her campaign of lies would not work. But I knew it would not be that simple. A few days later, I received a message on social media from a cousin of Leo's I had only met a handful of times. "I heard about what you did to Eleanor," the message read. "She has done nothing but love and support Leo his entire life. You should be ashamed of yourself for tearing their family apart." I blocked the cousin without replying, but the messages kept coming. Friends of Eleanor, distant relatives, people I barely knew, all echoing the same sentiment. That I was the villain. That I was the one who had destroyed their perfect family. It was a coordinated attack, and it was starting to take its toll. I felt isolated and attacked. I started to doubt myself. Was I the one who was being unreasonable? Had I pushed things too far? Leo saw the effect it was having on me. He held me as I cried, his face a mask of helpless anger. "Do not listen to them, Clara," he said, his voice fierce. "They do not know the truth. We know the truth." But the truth felt like a very small shield against a very large army. I knew we had to do something more. We could not just hide and hope it would go away. We needed to find a way to silence her for good. We needed leverage. Something so powerful, so undeniable that she would have no choice but to back down. And then I remembered the priest's words at our wedding, the words that had started this whole chain of events. We spoke about this. Father Michael knew something. He knew more than just what Eleanor had planned for the wedding. He was the only person who had seen behind her mask, who had heard her confess her true intentions. I knew what I had to do. I had to go back to the church. I had to talk to Father Michael. He was the key. Making the appointment to see Father Michael felt like a huge step. I was nervous. I was not a particularly religious person, and the thought of discussing my messy family problems with a priest was intimidating. But I was also desperate. I felt like we were under siege, and I needed an ally. Leo offered to come with me, but I told him I needed to do this alone. This was about Eleanor's conversation with the priest, and I felt that my presence alone might make him more willing to speak freely. The church was quiet and cool, a peaceful sanctuary from the turmoil of the outside world. Father Michael greeted me in his office, a small book-lined room that smelled of old paper and lemon polish. He had the same kind, steady eyes I remembered from the wedding. "Clara," he said, his voice gentle. "I have been expecting you." His words surprised me. "You have?" I asked. He nodded, gesturing for me to sit down. "I saw the look on your face at the wedding, and I saw the pain in Leo's. I knew that what Eleanor did was not the end of the story, but the beginning." I took a deep breath and told him everything. I told him about the stolen money, the lies, the confrontation, and the smear campaign that Eleanor was now waging against us. I told him how isolated and attacked I felt. He listened patiently, his hands clasped on his desk, his expression calm and compassionate. He did not interrupt me once. When I was finished, there was a long silence. I waited, my heart pounding for his judgment. I was half expecting a lecture about forgiveness and turning the other cheek. Instead, he surprised me. "Eleanor is a deeply troubled woman," he said, his voice filled with a sad wisdom. "Her love for her son has become twisted into a possessive need for control. She sees you not as a daughter, but as a rival." "She is trying to destroy our marriage," I said, my voice trembling. "I do not know how to fight her." "You fight her with the truth," he said simply. "But her truth and my truth are two different things. She has an army of people who believe her version of events." "Then you need a truth that is undeniable," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "Something that she cannot twist or deny." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a confidential tone. "What I am about to tell you was told to me in the sanctity of a counseling session, not a confessional. Morally, I believe I have a duty to prevent further harm." Eleanor came to see me a few weeks before the wedding. She was in a state of great distress. I leaned forward, my breath catching in my throat. "This was it." "She told me she was terrified of losing Leo," he continued. "Not just emotionally, but financially. She confessed that she had been managing his finances for years. She was afraid that once you were married, you would encourage him to take control of his own affairs, and she would be left with nothing." My mind reeled. This was not just about a mother's love. It was about money. It was always about money. "But it was more than that," Father Michael said, his expression growing grim. "She spoke about Leo's father. He passed away many years ago, as you know. She mentioned his will. She was very agitated when she spoke of it. She said something that I found very strange. She said, 'He tried to cut me out then, but I would not let him. And I will not let her cut me out now.' My blood ran cold. What did that mean? He tried to cut her out? What did she mean by that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I do not know for sure," he said, shaking his head. "She was very vague, but it was clear that there is some unresolved issue surrounding her late husband's will, an issue that she is desperate to keep hidden, and an issue that she believes your marriage has brought to the forefront." He sat back in his chair, his gaze steady. "I believe the key to stopping Eleanor lies in that will. If you can find out what she is hiding, you will have the leverage you need to protect your marriage." I left the church with my head spinning. A will. A secret. This was so much bigger and darker than I had ever imagined. Eleanor was not just a manipulative mother. She was a woman with a dangerous secret, a secret she would do anything to protect. I drove home, my mind racing. How was I supposed to get a copy of a will from 20 years ago? Leo had been just a child when his father died. He probably knew nothing about it. When I got back to the apartment, Leo was waiting for me, pacing anxiously. "What did he say?" he asked, the moment I walked through the door. I told him everything. I watched his face as the story unfolded, as the pieces of his mother's deception clicked into place. He looked shocked, then disgusted. Then finally, a look of cold determination settled on his face. "My father's will," he said, the words tasting strange in his mouth. "I have never even seen it. My mother always said it was complicated, that the lawyers handled everything. She said he left everything to her to manage for the family. Another lie. A lie he had been told his entire life. We need to find it, Leo, I said, my voice firm. We need to know what she is hiding. But how? We had no idea where to even start looking. The lawyer who had handled the estate was long since retired, or possibly even deceased. The records could be anywhere. And then I remembered something. A name I had not thought of in a long time. Aunt Carol, Leo's aunt, his father's sister. She and Eleanor had never been close. Carol was a quiet, no-nonsense woman who lived a few hours away. We only saw her at holidays and family gatherings. She was always polite but distant. I had always assumed she just did not like me. But now I wondered if her distance was not about me, but about Eleanor. She was the only person left who had been an adult when Leo's father died. She was the only one who might know the truth. We need to call your Aunt Carol, I said to Leo. He looked at me, a flicker of hope in his eyes. You are right, he said, nodding slowly. She never trusted my mother. She might know something. Leo picked up the phone and dialed his aunt's number. I held my breath as he explained the situation. I could hear the surprise in her voice, then a long, heavy sigh. I am not surprised, Leo, she said, her voice weary. I have been waiting for this day for a very long time. Your mother is not the woman you think she is. She agreed to meet with us. She told us to come to her house the next day. She said she had something for us, something she had kept safe for 20 years. Something she had promised her brother she would give to Leo when the time was right. It was a copy of his father's will. The drive to Aunt Carol's house felt like a pilgrimage. We were traveling towards an unknown truth, a truth that had the power to either save our future or shatter our past completely. I was a bundle of nerves, my mind racing with possibilities. What could be in that will that was so explosive? What had Eleanor been hiding for all these years? Aunt Carol lived in a small, cozy house with a large garden. She greeted us at the door with a sad smile. She looked older than I remembered, the lines on her face etched with a quiet sorrow. She led us into her living room and handed us each a cup of tea. She did not waste time with small talk. She went to a locked wooden chest in the corner of the room and pulled out a thick, yellowed envelope. Your father gave this to me a week before he passed away, she said, her voice soft. He made me promise to keep it safe. He said that Eleanor was not to be trusted. He said that I should give it to you, Leo, when you were old enough to understand. When you were ready to be your own man. She handed the envelope to Leo. His hands trembled as he took it. He stared at it for a long moment, as if it were a sacred artifact. Then, with a deep breath, he broke the seal and pulled out the documents inside. It was his father's last will and testament. We read it together, our heads bent over the pages. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was clear. And it was devastating. Leo's father had not left everything to Eleanor. In fact, he had left her a relatively small allowance, enough to live comfortably. But not extravagantly. The bulk of his estate, including the house, his investments, and a significant trust fund, he had left directly to Leo. There was a specific clause, underlined in the document. The inheritance was to be held in trust until Leo's 30th birthday, or upon his marriage, whichever came first. Our wedding had triggered the clause. By law, the moment we said, I do, Leo had become the sole beneficiary of his father's considerable fortune. And Eleanor's control over it was supposed to end. My mind was reeling. This was the secret. This was what she had been hiding. She had not just been managing Leo's finances. She had been illegally controlling his inheritance, living off his money for years. She had lied to him his entire life, telling him the money was hers, making him believe he was dependent on her generosity. The scene at the wedding now made perfect, sickening sense. Her cry of, I'm losing my only son, was not about love. It was about money. She was not losing a son. She was losing an income stream. Her attempts to sabotage our relationship, to break us up, were not born of jealousy. but of financial desperation. If we had not gotten married, she could have maintained her control for another year. Our marriage was a direct threat to her lifestyle. "She has been stealing from me," Leo said, his voice a hoarse whisper. He looked up from the will, his face a mixture of shock, betrayal, and a deep, soul-crushing sadness. "My entire life has been a lie." Aunt Carol reached out and placed a comforting hand on his arm. "Your father loved you very much, Leo," she said gently. "He saw what your mother was capable of. He tried to protect you. He wrote this will to give you a future independent of her control." "Why did you not tell me sooner?" Leo asked, his voice filled with anguish. "Why did you let her do this for so long?" "Your father made me promise to wait," Carol said, her eyes filling with tears. "He was afraid that if she knew you had the will, she would find a way to manipulate you. He wanted you to be old enough, strong enough to stand up to her. He wanted you to have a partner, a wife who would support you. He knew you could not fight her alone." Her words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Leo's father, a man I had never met, had anticipated me. He had trusted that his son would one day find someone who would help him break free. I felt a profound connection to this man, a sense of shared purpose across the years. We were no longer just fighting for our marriage. We were fighting for Leo's legacy, for his father's last wish. We now had the ultimate leverage, the truth. A legally binding document that exposed Eleanor's decades of deception. This was not just a family drama anymore. This was fraud. This was a crime. We had the power to destroy her. We could take her to court, expose her to the world, and potentially even send her to jail. But what would that do to Leo? Could he handle the public humiliation of his own mother? We sat in Aunt Carol's living room for hours, talking through our options. We could go the legal route, which would be messy and public. Or we could confront her privately, using the will as a weapon to force her to relinquish control and disappear from our lives forever. We chose the latter. We did not want revenge. We wanted peace. We wanted to be free of her. We formulated a plan, a final confrontation. But this time it would be on our terms. We would not go to her house, her seat of power. We would summon her to ours, and we would not be alone. We needed a witness. Someone neutral, someone with authority, someone she could not dismiss or intimidate. We needed Father Michael. We called him from Aunt Carol's house. We explained what we had found. He was not surprised. He had suspected something like this all along. He agreed to mediate the meeting. He said it was his duty to see this through to a just and peaceful resolution. The stage was set for the final act. We had the script, we had the players, and we had the undeniable truth. There would be no more lies, no more games. This would be the end of Eleanor's reign. The day of the confrontation was gray and overcast, the weather a perfect reflection of my mood. Our apartment, usually a bright and cheerful space, felt like a courtroom. Father Michael arrived first. He looked solemn, but his presence was a calming one. He placed a hand on both of our shoulders. "Remember," he said, his voice low and steady, "the goal here is not to punish, but to find a path to peace. Speak your truth, but do not let anger consume you. You are in control now." His words helped to ground me. He was right. This was not about screaming or accusations. This was about a calm, firm presentation of facts. It was about taking back our power, not about stooping to her level. Leo was a coiled spring of tension beside me. He had barely spoken all morning. I knew this was going to be incredibly difficult for him. He was about to confront the woman who had raised him, the woman he had loved and trusted, and accuse her of the ultimate betrayal. I squeezed his hand, and he gave me a small, grateful smile. He was scared, but he was ready. Eleanor arrived exactly on time. She had clearly prepared herself for battle. She was dressed in an elegant, severe suit, her hair perfectly coiffed. She looked like a powerful CEO, not a grieving mother. Her eyes widened in surprise when she saw Father Michael, This was not part of her plan. She had expected to be able to manipulate Leo and me alone. The presence of a neutral third party threw her off balance. "Father Michael," she said, her voice tight with forced pleasantry. "What a surprise to see you here." "Eleanor," he said with a calm, polite nod. "Please have a seat. Leo and Clara have some things they need to discuss with you." She sat down stiffly on the edge of the armchair, her back ramrod straight. She looked from me to Leo, her eyes cold and calculating. She was trying to gauge our strategy, to anticipate our attack. "I do not know what this is all about," she began, launching her preemptive strike. "But if this is another attempt to bully me about that silly loan, I can assure you, this is not about the $5,000, Mom." Leo cut her off, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. He had placed a folder on the coffee table in front of her. He slid it across the polished surface. "This is about this." Eleanor stared at the folder, a flicker of fear in her eyes. She did not move to open it. She knew. On some level, she must have known this day would always come. "What is it?" she asked, her voice a little shaky. "It is my father's will," Leo said, his voice quiet but carrying immense weight. "The real one." I watched as the color drained from Eleanor's face. Her carefully constructed composure began to crack. She looked at Leo, then at me, then at Father Michael. She was trapped. There was no one to rescue her, no one to believe her lies. I do not know what you are talking about," she stammered, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape route. "That is the will your father's lawyer gave me." "No, it is not," Leo said, his voice hardening. "Aunt Carol kept the original, the one my father gave her for safekeeping because he knew you could not be trusted." He leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. "He left the house to me, Mom. He left his investments to me. He left everything to me. To be given to me on my 30th birthday, or on my wedding day." He let the words hang in the air, each one a hammer blow against her defenses. "Our wedding day, Mom. The day you made that scene, crying about losing your son. You were not sad. You were panicking. Because you knew your time was up. The money was gone." Eleanor's facade finally shattered. Her face crumpled and she let out a strangled sob. "That is not true," she cried, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "I did it to protect you. You were too young, too irresponsible. You would have squandered it all." "Protect me?" Leo's voice was laced with bitter irony. "You call this protection? You lied to me my entire life. You stole my inheritance. You lived in my house, spent my money, all while telling me how much you had sacrificed for me. You made me feel indebted to you." "That is not protection, Mom. That is control." "I did what I had to do," she shrieked, tears streaming down her face. "Your father, he tried to leave me with nothing. After everything I did for him, he was a cruel, ungrateful man." "He left you a generous allowance," I said, my voice cutting through her tirade. "He did not leave you with nothing. He just made sure you could not control Leo. But you found a way, did not you? You forged his will, or you paid off a lawyer to create a fake one. You hid the truth for 20 years. Eleanor stared at me, her eyes filled with a venomous hatred. "You," she hissed. "This is all your fault. Everything was fine until you came along. You turned him against me." "No, Eleanor," Father Michael said, his voice calm but firm, intervening for the first time. "You did this to yourself. You let your fear and your greed corrupt your love for your son. You had a choice, and you chose deception. Now, you must face the consequences." The fight went out of her. She slumped in her chair, a broken woman. The powerful matriarch was gone, replaced by a small, pathetic figure. She had no more lies to tell, no more tricks to play. She had been utterly and completely exposed. Leo slid another document across the table. This one was from our lawyer. "These are our terms," he said, his voice cold and businesslike. "You will sign over the deed to the house immediately. You will provide a full accounting of all my father's assets and return what is left of them to my control. You will have 30 days to vacate the house, and you will cease all contact with me and with Clara. You will not call us. You will not email us. And you will not send your friends to harass us. If you violate any of these terms, we will press criminal charges for fraud and theft." Eleanor stared at the papers, her face ashen. It was a complete and total surrender. She was losing everything. Her home, her money, her son. The very thing she had been so terrified of had come to pass. Not because of me, but because of her own actions. She picked up the pen, her hand shaking so violently she could barely hold it. She looked at Leo one last time, her eyes pleading. "Leo, please," she whispered. "Do not do this. I am your mother." "A mother would not do what you did," he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. "Sign it." She signed the papers. Her signature was a spidery, illegible scrawl. She pushed them back across the table and stood up, her movements stiff and robotic. She walked to the door without looking at any of us. She opened it, and for a moment she paused on the threshold, her back to us. "I hope you're happy," she said, her voice a hollow whisper. Then she was gone. The silence she left behind was deafening. The long, ugly war was finally over. We had won, but it felt less like a celebration and more like the quiet, somber aftermath of a devastating battle. In the weeks that followed, we moved through a strange new landscape of peace and quiet. The constant tension that had been a feature of my life since meeting Leo was gone. There were no more passive-aggressive phone calls, no more manipulative text messages, no more surprise visits designed to undermine me. The silence from Eleanor was absolute. It was unsettling at first, like the eerie calm after a hurricane. I kept expecting the other shoe to drop, for her to launch some new, desperate attack. But she did not. She had been truly defeated. Leo took charge of his father's estate. He hired a new financial advisor and a lawyer to sort through the mess Eleanor had made. It was a complicated and painful process. We discovered that she had spent a shocking amount of the inheritance over the years, funding her lavish lifestyle, her expensive vacations, and her constant need to keep up appearances. What was left was still a considerable sum, more money than I could ever have imagined. But seeing the numbers on the page, seeing how much she had squandered, filled me with a quiet rage. It was not just money she had stolen. It was Leo's security, his legacy from a father he barely got to know. True to her word, Eleanor vacated the house within the 30-day limit. She did not contact us. We heard through Aunt Carol that she had moved into a small rental apartment in a different town. She had sold off most of her expensive furniture to make ends meet. Her army of friends, the ones who had been so quick to attack me, had mysteriously disappeared now that she was no longer a wealthy, influential figure in their social circle. Her fall from grace was swift and complete. One of the hardest days was when Leo and I went to his childhood home for the first time after she had left. The house was empty, echoing with the ghosts of the past. All the pristine furniture and polished surfaces were gone. All that remained were a few pieces of forgotten clutter and the faint, cloying scent of Eleanor's perfume. We walked through the empty rooms, the silence amplifying our emotions. Leo was quiet, his face a mixture of sadness and relief. This house, which had once been a symbol of his mother's power and control, was now his. He was finally the master of his own home, of his own life. "What are we going to do with it?" I asked him softly as we stood in the living room where our final confrontation had taken place. "I do not want to live here," he said, his voice firm. "There are too many bad memories." I felt a wave of relief. I had been dreading the thought of living in that house, of sleeping in the rooms where she had plotted against us. "We will sell it," he continued. "We will sell it, and we will use the money to buy our own house. A new house. A place with no ghosts. A place where we can build our own memories." And that is what we did. We sold the house, and With the proceeds and the money from Leo's inheritance, we bought a beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood on the other side of the city. It was a house filled with light and warmth. It had a big backyard for a future dog, and a spare room that we dreamed of one day turning into a nursery. It was our house, a symbol of our new beginning. A few months after we moved in, I was sorting through a box of old mail that had been forwarded from our old apartment. At the bottom of the box was a small, plain envelope with no return address. The handwriting was instantly recognizable. It was from Eleanor. My first instinct was to throw it away, to not let her poison our new life. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was not an apology. It was not a plea for forgiveness. It was a short, bitter note. "I hope you are happy," it read. "You took everything from me." I read the note, and I did not feel anger or pity. I felt nothing at all. She still did not get it. She still believed that I had taken something from her, that I was the villain in her story. She could not, or would not, see that she had done this to herself. I showed the note to Leo. He read it, his face impassive. He took it from my hand, walked over to the fireplace in our new living room, and dropped it into the flames. We watched it curl and blacken, the bitter words turning to ash. It was a final, symbolic act of release. We were free. Our life now is quiet and happy. Leo is a different man. He is more confident, more relaxed. He is no longer walking on eggshells, no longer torn between his wife and his mother. He is simply my husband, my partner, my best friend. Our relationship, forged in the fire of his mother's making, is stronger than I ever thought possible. We have Aunt Carol over for dinner often. She has become a wonderful, supportive presence in our lives. We have reconnected with the family members who were wise enough to see Eleanor for who she was, and we have cut ties with those who are not. We have built a small, strong circle of love and support around us. Sometimes I think about Eleanor. I wonder if she is lonely. I wonder if she ever feels a flicker of remorse. But I do not let myself wonder for long. Her choices are her own. Her loneliness is a prison of her own making. She used to cry that she was losing her only son. In the end, through her own jealousy and greed, through her desperate, suffocating need for control, she made her own prophecy come true. We sent her a change of address card when we moved into our new house. It was the civil thing to do. We never got a reply.